Hey, it's Lyria. I've been doing PTR testing for the new 10.2 raid Amirdrassil for the last 5 or 6 weeks or so, and I am so excited for this new raid tier. And it is not just because I play a druid. I have tested all of the available fights on both heroic and mythic, excluding the last boss because it's unavailable. And I am super excited to share the 3 mythic fights that I am looking forward to healing the most as a Resto Druid. The first fight I want to talk about is Council of Dreams. And Council of Dreams has 3 bosses. It's, like it says in the title, it's a council fight, and I have always loved council fights. I especially love healing them. This one is a lot of fun, and I especially love how interactive the 3 boss abilities are. For example, the Dryad has a Constricting Thorns cast, and you're supposed to interrupt it with the Guardian Druid. His name is Urktos. Urktos' Barreling Charge. And so when the Dryad starts casting this ability, it is the only time that she is susceptible to the Guardian Druid's charge. And so what we did on Mythic, our strategy was to have ranged soak this barreling charge. It's split damage. So we had ranged soak the charge, and the tank would kind of aim it towards the Dryad. If the Dryad is not casting this ability, then she's busy kind of jumping around the room and moving from side to side. So you know that the barreling charge is meant to interrupt this cast. There is a little bit of damage that goes out before the Guardian Druid actually charges at the Dryad, but I don't think you're meant to take all of the damage from the Constricting Thorns cast, which is the Dryad's cast. It would be a lot of damage. We did that a couple times on testing because, we were just kind of getting the hang of things, but I don't think you're meant to take all of that damage. But there is a little bit of damage that goes out beforehand, and the charge itself also does damage. Like I said, it's split damage. So it's just these 2 abilities and how they interact. It's a fun mechanic, and it's fun to heal. The other part of this fight that I enjoy is Pip. Pip is the 3rd boss on this council fight, and one of the abilities that it has is a polymorph bomb. He turns several players into ducks, and so you have all of these players running around eating flowers to then use an extra action ability to get out of the polymorph. It's great. It's really funny. There's also constant damage during Pip's Emerald Winds cast, which basically just pushes players in a certain direction and does a little bit of damage. Overall, Council of Dreams feels like there is consistent damage that goes out throughout most of the fight, which there is, and I love those kinds of fights. I love fights that are healing intensive, or even if they're not that healing intensive, I like fights that require pretty good throughput healing and require you to pay attention and give you something to do throughout the entire fight. And the other part of this fight that I am loving is that it looks like an organized chaos. When you have this giant Guardian Druid, barreling across the room, and you have a Dryad that's jumping around all over the place, and you have flowers popping up all over, and you have ducks running around to eat the flowers. It just looks chaotic, but overall this fight is an organized chaos. The next fight I want to talk about is Larodar, and Larodar I think is one of the best designed fights in this entire raid. I love it a lot. There's also a healer job on this fight. It has to do with a healing check, and this healing check has to do with brambles. So there's a lot surrounding the brambles, and we won't go into it just yet, but right now what I want to talk about is the fact that healers need to heal these brambles to full. And when the brambles are healed to full, it creates this barrier that players can then stand in. So healers need to make the check. You heal it up to full, everyone goes in it, the boss starts casting this ability, and if you don't heal the brambles to full in time to get this barrier, or 2, you're not standing in the barrier, then it's probably going to be a wipe. This cast is brutal, it's unforgiving, so you need to heal these up to full in order to spawn this, especially on Mythic. You're going to need that barrier for this ability. Another important job on this fight is making sure that the Treant NPCs are healthy. The Treants heal a seed in the middle of the room, and when the seed is healed up, then a few players can click on it and then receive a buff that allows them to get rid of the fire patches around the room. If you don't do this, then you would run out of space in the room. In addition to both of those healer jobs that I just mentioned, you're also dealing with boss charges across the room that deal damage and just regular AoE raid damage throughout the fight. During testing, this felt like a pretty fast-paced fight in a room that feels like it's getting smaller because of all the fire patches, and it is getting smaller. There are so many interactive mechanics on this fight that I love. Like, one mechanic leads to the other, which then leads to the other, which leads to another. You get these brambles that spawn. And then once DPS kill the brambles, then healers have to heal the brambles to full. And then once that is done, then you get a barrier, and then all the players stand in the barrier. So it's like one mechanic leads into the next one, and it's so much fun. I cannot wait for this raid to go live. The last fight that I'm looking forward to healing is Nymue. And Nymue is a fight that we've seen a couple of changes, additions of mechanics or changes to mechanics and things like that throughout the last couple of weeks. So I was a little bit nervous to include Nymue in this video, but overall, I don't think they're going to overhaul the entire fight. I don't think that's going to happen. So I am including Nymue in this fight because I have loved what I've tested so far. Nymue is in this giant room that gets split up into different sections, and each time you cross over into a different section, you get a stacking dot. So you want to minimize your movements. However, there are these circles that spawn on the ground that you need to soak. Otherwise, they do raid-wide damage. So you're kind of forced to move throughout the various sections of the fight. If you didn't soak these circles, then they would just keep spawning, and eventually you would get overrun with all of these circles that need to be soaked. They'd be doing way too much raid-wide damage. So you are meant to cross through these barriers. They call them threads. The threads are what separate the sections of the room. And this fight might require a little bit more movement than the other two that I mentioned, but again, I'm making this video as someone who mains a Resto Druid, and so movement isn't really that big of a deal for Resto Druids. I mean, we really only cast, Trank and Regrowth and Wild Growth, so it isn't that bad because most of our abilities are instant. There's the part of the fight where the raid group splits into two, and you have these two ads that spawn on opposite sides of the room. But at the end of this kind of intermission phase, I guess, everyone ends up back in the middle where Nymue is, and she ends up casting this ability that does several ticks of raid-wide damage. And I mean, this damage is predictable, so you'll have your healing cooldowns ready for it, but I enjoyed healing this because it gives you something to do. You know that damage is going out, and I always love something to heal. I love most of the fights in this raid, but these are the three fights that stand out to me the most because I just love the mechanics, and they're fun fights, they're well-designed fights, and they're fun to heal as well as a Resto Druid. I don't think I've said this enough, but I cannot wait until this raid is live. I have absolutely loved raid testing every single week. It's the thing that I look forward to. I love seeing these fights, and I love seeing how they're slightly tweaked or changed. They're just a lot of fun. I feel like I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this raid once it's finally live. Let me know in the comments what you are most looking forward to in the new 10.2 patch or in the new raid Amirdrassil.